Her dream was for a democratic and just Syria.
My name is Razan Zaitouneh, human rights activist from Damascus.
As a lawyer, she documented the atrocities of the Syrian war. That made her enemies on all sides.
I just want the truth. I want to know what happened to Razan and my friends.
In 2013, Razan Zaitouneh was kidnapped along with 3 colleagues by unidentified assailants.
Her abduction was really a turning point in the Syrian revolution.
For weeks, DW's investigative unit delved deep into the case. We spoke with dozens of witnesses, analyzed satellite imagery, and combed through interrogation records to show that not only did the Assad regime target activists, but a rebel group did too. Our search begins in Paris. We meet Nadim Houri.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Houri led the terrorism program at Human Rights Watch when the uprising against the Assad regime began in 2011.
You create an inbox that you both have access to.
He was in close contact with Razan, who was organizing protests across Syria.
She became a key source. She had this sort of softness, almost frailty to her when you met her at the beginning, and you're like, how is she doing this very dangerous job? And then as soon as you spoke to her, you immediately discovered the sort of steely courage and principles.
The Assad regime launched a brutal crackdown against the protesters and arrested scores of opposition figures. Razan was forced into hiding, but she continued to speak out while underground.
Not even over 100,000 deaths, or harsh siege, or the betrayal of the international community can ever defeat the will of people who has a dream and faith in the future.
In 2013, Razan fled Assad's tight grip in Damascus for neighboring Douma. The town was under the control of various armed opposition groups. Together they fought Assad, but often each other too. The hardline militia group Jaish al-Islam increasingly had the upper hand. Douma was the last place Razan was seen alive. The search for clues brings us to Turkey. In Istanbul, we meet with a close friend and colleague of Razan. He fled with her to Douma. Osama Nassar tells us it was pure luck that he was not kidnapped with her. He had just left their office only a few minutes before the abduction. To this day, he wonders whether he could have done more to find his friends. The arrival in Douma, he says, was not easy, particularly due to the armed opposition group Jaish al-Islam.
They felt threatened by us. We worked in the field of human rights, and we documented human rights abuses. We wanted to promote democracy and human rights, to empower women. Jaish al-Islam didn't want that. They didn't want us there. That's what they told us.
But the activists were not deterred. They continued to push for a flourishing civil society. Razan also began investigating harrowing claims against the hardline militia, that it detained and tortured civilians in its prisons.
I remember that. She insisted on visiting the detention facilities that were run by Jaish al-Islam. And she would go. I mean, if anyone who knew Razan, she could be insistent, you know. She really knew no fear.
Soon after, Razan's life was threatened. Armed men shot in the air outside her office and left a threatening letter on her doorstep. "Leave Douma in 3 days or I will kill you." The phrase was repeated 5 times.
When you do an investigation, it's always
Through our sources in Syria, we identified the author of the threat letter.
Right.
In a statement we obtained exclusively, he speaks about how a Jaish al-Islam associate instructed him to threaten Razan.
So it's 1, 2...
Hamadi,
He told me that this girl is an agent, could have brought us to court on charges of war crimes. I told him if she was an agent and working against the country, why don't you do something? Why don't you kidnap her? Are you afraid of her? He said, no, we are not afraid of her. We will bring her down, but for now, we want to threaten her.
When Nadim Houri learned about the threats, he urged Razan to leave Douma. He was worried for her safety.
She responded the next day saying, I am not going to move. We did not do a revolution and lose thousands of souls so that such monsters can come and repeat the same unjust history. These people need to be held to account, just like the regime.
On December 9th, 2013, armed men stormed her office late at night. They kidnapped Razan, along with her husband, Wael Hamadeh, human rights activist Samira Khalil, and lawyer Nazem Hamadi. The latter was on the phone with his brother when the kidnappers arrived.
While they were talking, his brother heard loud noises, and someone shouted in classical Arabic, "Enemies of God." Nazem replied, "Calm down, guys. This is not acceptable." Then the line went dead.
Osama shows us photos from the crime scene. Drawers are ransacked, files and computers taken. This will soon lead us to the first clue. One of the stolen computers can be traced to an IP address used by Jaish al-Islam.
So they were later solved?
There were other leads, he tells us, but no one would earnestly pursue them. And none of the other armed rebel groups would come to aid the activists.
They didn't do anything. They were scared of a confrontation with Jaish al-Islam.
The kidnapping of Razan, for me, announced the moment where the jihadi arm of the sort of armed uprising dominated.
To this day, the hardline rebel group denies that they kidnapped Razan. We searched for former members of Jaish al-Islam who now live in Turkey. In the process, we established contact with a man who investigated the kidnapping on their behalf. He is willing to meet with us, but would only do so on condition of anonymity.
I investigated the kidnapping on behalf of Jaish al-Islam. I think they wanted to clear themselves. But as I gathered more and more evidence that implicated them, they suddenly started threatening me, and so I had to flee.
He said that many witnesses were threatened and even murdered by the group, and that Jaish al-Islam helped the main suspect flee after he was detained. He is convinced they are guilty.
I'm 100% sure that Jaish al-Islam is responsible for the kidnapping.
But the most important clue? The testimony of a young woman. She had met Razan in a prison run by the rebel group only a few months after the kidnapping.
We had heard the name Razan Zaitouneh. They once brought her to an interrogation. She refused, so they beat her and she fainted. They asked us to bring her back into her cell. When she woke up, I saw her green eyes. She was tall and slim.
Back in Berlin, we find another witness who also saw Razan in Jaish al-Islam's prison. We investigate both accounts using satellite imagery. They show that Razan was held on the premises of a repurposed agricultural facility in the center of Douma. The so-called Al-Tawba prison is controlled by only one group, Jaish al-Islam.
So I really think that it's Batoon.
We head to Syria to confront the Islamist militia with our findings. Spokesman Hamza Bayraktar is willing to speak to us without conditions. He denies any involvement in the kidnapping and instead blames the Assad regime and other jihadist groups. We meet him in northern Syria, where Jaish al-Islam remains active. In his office, we confront him with the testimonies of our witnesses who saw Razan Zaitouneh in their prison. His answer is short. They are all liars. He claims that they never had any of the activists in their custody.
Whoever claims that Jaish al-Islam is responsible for Razan Zaitouneh's disappearance is not being impartial. Rather, they're taking a political stance to accuse Jaish al-Islam. People who make such claims do not want to reveal the truth or unveil the perpetrators. It is a political claim to accuse Jaish al-Islam of kidnapping activists and civilians.
Meanwhile, French authorities are also investigating Jaish al-Islam for alleged war crimes and have even arrested a senior member of the group. In Paris, we meet with Syrian human rights lawyer Mazen Darwish. Together with lawyer Clémence Bechtat, they have filed criminal charges. Their findings implicate the rebel group. The only problem is proving it in a court of law.
The Syrian regime and Jaish al-Islam still have a lot of power and influence and capacity to intimidate and threaten the victims and the witnesses. So this really is a major concern for us, because any prosecution, successful prosecution, will also have to rely on this kind of testimonial evidence.
Day and night, they work to track down other witnesses and clues. They hope that the court will soon issue an indictment in a case that is no longer solely about Razan Zaitouneh's disappearance, but also about torture, summary executions, and the use of child soldiers.
Was it the 12th prison, or what was it?
It is time to say out loud that the Syrian population has also been victims of other groups who pretended to be fighting for the revolution, but who also turned against the population. This was what Razan was alerting about, and this is why maybe she died. And we think that it's also as a heritage to her and to the many others who had the courage to say this, that it's very important to continue the fight.